Hello, welcome to the September 27th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can simply submit your questions via email by sending it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or just simply sending it, entering it in the chat field, in the live chat field. We will go through all the questions chronologically as they've been asked, and as we do this, if you don't see an immediate response to your question, because sometimes we may get backed up on questions, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. So as we are going through the live streams, and as you ask your questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or which operating systems, if you're running a Mac or PC, and which level, so if you're running 11, 12, or 13, that information is always helpful. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field, so you can look for that several hours after the live stream ends. We also have Jan from Stockholm has created the website cubaseindex.com, and you could search for over 34,000 different topics that have been covered in various live streams throughout since we kind of ramped it up during COVID. So we want to give special thanks to Jan for that. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really do this to make it a better community experience. We also want to give special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource for the Steinberg community. So you could check that out as well. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. And I'm presenting from United States, from outside Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world. Today is the last live stream of the month, so we will be in about 2 hours, starting at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, 1 hour and 55 minutes from now. We will start our Club Cubase Zoom social meetup, and I had posted a link. I'm going to try to post it every half hour so that people will be able to log on. And if you haven't attended a Club Cubase Zoom social, it's just a wonderful way of being able to actually meet different people that are in the live streams, and just wonderful discussions. I look forward to it every month. And so with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we see from Fernando Matias, hi Greg, asking for my friend Hermano, who recently went pro. How can I use frequency to dynamically clear the low end on a bass track using the kick track in sidechain? Okay, so let's say if we have, there's a couple different approaches. So a lot of times we could do something as simple as kind of a normal sidechain. So we don't necessarily have to have frequency for that. So let's say if we have like a kick and a bass part here, and let me just get a better bass sound. All right, so let's say if I want to just utilize we'll just come over here and I'll just put a standard compressor on. So we'll come over, let's say we'll do our dynamics, and we'll just do, let's say, just a standard compressor. And then we could activate the sidechain on this particular compressor. So as we want to do is we want to turn the sidechain on. We go to our sidechain setup, and we can say, I want this as the sidechain input. So now as the kick will now serve as the sidechain input for the particular track. So we'll come over to our kick track, and it's going to do it via the aux send. So that's the most common way of doing it. Now, if we wanted to utilize kind of a different plugin for that, if you want to do more dynamic EQ functions, what we could do is kind of the same concept. We'll open up, let's say, our frequency plugin. So we'll go to EQ, we'll select frequency, and let's say frequency is an 8-band dynamic EQ. So not only can it serve as a traditional EQ, so if I wanted to EQ out kind of a particular nasty vocal range, but I could also have this kind of be triggered with a sidechain input as well. So to do this, we would activate the sidechain, go to the sidechain setup, and since we have 8 bands, we could choose like sidechain input 4, and we want to add our sidechain input, and we say our tech house. So we're going to take our kick track, and we're going to now just make sure that this is actually feeding the sidechain. So now as we do this, and if we click on the dynamics, so we can see that we're dealing with band 4, that we could now come over and just click on the dynamics here. And now as we do this, we can just have the sidechain triggered, and that would trigger the dynamic EQ. If we actually click right here on the dynamics, you could actually have some more additional settings where you could see more controls. So, and again, that's just kind of clicking between kind of like our traditional EQ view and the dynamics that we could see that. But here the side chaining works the same way. So whether you wanted to use with standard VST3 plugins, or if you wanted to use frequency, like, or, standard dynamics plugins, or use a dynamic EQ and frequency, you could do that pretty easily with Cubase. All right, so we see C. McD says, "Hi Greg, love your show. Thanks. Wonderful to see Jazz Dude on." We have Uno Memento, very loyal attendee from Finland. Wonderful to see you on. See Daniel from Croatia is just heading home. Let's see, and his question to me is, Greg, what's your favorite Cubase functionality? I like that it's maybe not a particular thing, but as I kind of go, I find what's always appealed to me about Cubase is how, you go down like this and you think you're going to, like, you may be the first person that's kind of gone down this workflow path. I want to do this, and you're like, okay, I think it's going to take 8 steps to get there. And realize that when you got to step 8, that someone had planned for, the exact path with all of when you came to the fork in the trail, and that you could have had, 5 or 6 different options or ways to accomplish what you wanted to do. That someone in the development cycle had gone through those, all of those paths for your workflow so that you could accomplish what you want to do. So, and I still love that, over, I guess I've been running Cubase almost 33 years, that I can still right click, I can come over here, I could cut, I can erase, I can move parts around, I could join parts together, like this core functionality of being able to manipulate parts. There's a reason that every program has basically migrated to this linear format, and Cubase really hasn't had to change that since 1989. So we have a bunch of really smart developers. So. All right, wonderful to see Jan from Stockholm on. Always grateful to have Jazz Dude on with his perfect attendance. Bratman Studios says he's looking forward to the Zoom meeting later on. We have Arnold's Canal saying hello from Germany. We have Stefan from Sweden. All right, we have Tim K. Always grateful to be joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw to my cat Steven, and then Mark Ravenslock, Stella, and any other pets. Wonderful to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Thanks for joining us. All right, and always great to have Michael Pierce on. All right, and we see Vince from Winnipeg. Okay, so we have Fontecha Studio. Master, thank you so much. I have a question. How can you monitor recording process in a laptop headphone port, but using Dante Virtual Sound Card? Is it possible? So generally you pick which audio interface that you want to use. Do you want to use Dante as your audio interface, or do you want to use your inboard audio, your onboard audio? So there are two different audio interfaces. You realize that these different interfaces also have different clocks, and these clocks are out of time. So, if I was going to be monitoring, if I was going to be using, Dante virtual sound card, what I would do, and I know that anytime you buy a Dante piece of hardware, and I think probably Audinate, they sell the chips and they sell the hardware so that that device could run Dante. But I would, if you really wanted to do it, I would choose to, if you don't have any analog outs on your Dante interface, there are little Dante headphone boxes that you can get. So they may be a little more expensive than other headphone boxes, but basically you can run one audio device at a time for clocking purposes. With Dante, you have the capability of running multiple audio devices if you're connected to the Dante network. So I would take advantage of that and get get something that you could monitor your Dante audio off of. All right, great to see Michael Graybill checking in from Dallas. Thanks for joining us. And we have Zai Fernando sending greetings from Norway. We have Patty Freethinker saying hello. Thanks for being on the live stream today. We have Earth Drive sending says Hermano also from Portugal. Thanks for being on. John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, we have Y42 from Vienna, Austria. Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. We have Balsa sending greetings from Montenegro. Always wanted to go there. All right, so we have Val at Y42. Question, is it possible to have a keyboard shortcut for changing the buffer size of an interface? So currently, no. That window that we pull up, so when we get to the studio setup to the control panel, this is actually outside of Cubase, so we don't really, so right now we're going into the core audio settings on Mac, or you would go into the control panel for your audio interface in Windows. So we don't really have access to key commands for this because this is actually outside of Cubase. So and so you have to kind of set it manually. There may be, depending on your audio interface, you might be able to actually do it in from a key command. I don't know of many interfaces that do that, but that window is actually outside of Cubase. All right, Ecstasy Tune says, hi Greg, can I still keep my Cubase license if I cross-grade to Nuendo? So if you do like an upgrade from Cubase to Nuendo, I think that your Cubase license is then rolled into your Nuendo license. So I don't think it's a separate license. If you bought a, so if you are jumping up to Nuendo, and from your Cubase, you're getting the discount because you're turning your Cubase into a Nuendo license. So I believe that it would automatically just turn your Cubase license into Nuendo license, but Nuendo has all the features that Cubase has. So there's probably not a big concern over that. All right, so we had Neil Conway checking in from Oregon. Thanks for joining us. Balsa asks, hi Greg, what is the best way to detect tempo of a MIDI event? Sometimes I record an idea quickly without a click, and I need to figure out after I record the MIDI notes. Okay, so there is tempo detection, and that does work for MIDI. So let me just find, I have a project, just kind of show this. All right, so let's say I'll just come over here So we don't really have anything recorded to the click. So you can select the event. You can go to your project and say, let's go to tempo detection and say analyze. And now it's automatically figured out the tempo of the MIDI performance. So you can just select the event. Again, go to project, to tempo detection. This works for audio or MIDI. And that will kind of automatically place you in 1/4 because it's figuring out kind of where the beats are falling. And then we can say, okay, I want my 4/4 measure to start there. So as we listen to it. So at that point, just select the event, go to your project menu to tempo detection, and you can go from there. All right, so we see Trend Trader says this is amazing, just purchased 13 and it's deep. Yeah, so it's incredibly feature rich. And we're here to help you along your way. And congratulations on getting Cubase 13. Happy to have you on the live stream. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo. We have Pertti Komenen also joining from Finland. Okay, so we have GBRL says hi from Mexico, guys. Just wanted to come and see some tips and advice. Well, welcome to the live stream. Glad to have you. All right, we see that Stella is not with Mark Rabin, but we'll give a virtual woof for the playback. So everyone say woof to Stella, Mark's dog. Great to see Neil Conway on. All right, so we see Michael Graybill says, I missed the old Cubase VST option to set a background image in the project window or make it transparent to see a desktop background. Images inspire me. Any chance we might one day see this again? Yeah, I remember kind of having a discussion with one of the developers, and, you know, I think when they saw like so many people having such kind of inconsistent things, and people were complaining about the Cubase user interface because they saw a picture of someone's desktop that they didn't like or the background that they didn't like. So I'll pass it along as kind of a feature suggestion. Like I used to have a friend that would put, you know, a picture of his wife and kids. So when they would come, it's like, look, I'm thinking of you. And, you know, and he had a picture of his wife and kids as the Cubase background. Sometimes it made editing hard because of the different colors. But I'll make sure it gets passed along as a user request. Okay, and we see Ravi from England. All right, Benny from Sweden's out on a gig. Have a great gig. All right, so we see Nothing Channel says, I would love it if you could make Q-Link enabled by default. You know, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of consequences that could happen, you know, if you make Q-Link enabled by default. So, you know, if we are actually, you know, so a lot of unintended consequences could happen, you know. So let's say I have multiple tracks selected here. Let's say I'm in this project and I have multiple tracks currently selected, and then I want to move the fader of one, then all three would move, you know. So there's lots of different consequences that could do it. So a lot of times that's why we let the user kind of enable Q-Link, so that it can, and we could see if we save it in a template, if it's automatically preserved the status. Okay, so let's say I have Q-Link turned on now. And we'll save as template. Okay, so I'm going to close this project. Let's do a new project, and we'll open up that Q-Link enabled as template. So it looks like if you save it as your template or save it within the song, that you could have it automatically enabled. So, consider doing that. But, be aware of the consequences that could cause. All right, so we see Rob from Tarpon Springs says, I'm still not seeing the drum map in Cubase 13. When my cursor is hovering over the far left lane, the mouse wheel displays the drum sound. Okay, so let me know if you see the drum editor or not. So let's say if we have a drum map active here, so let me just get to okay, so let me know if when you're in if you actually see, so let's come over here. So let's say, we have our drum map loaded. So I don't have a drum map loaded. So let's say I go to the drum map. I'm going to create the drum map from the instrument. So if you're doing that, I think you said you were running Groove Agent on the last live stream. Let me know if you see the drum editor or not. So when you say, when my cursor is hovering over the far left lane, the mouse wheel value displays the drum sound. So I'm not. So I don't see it kind of listed like when I hover. So let me know if, I guess we could see that there. So as I go to hover, I can see the drum sounds here, but make sure, see if you just come over here to the drum editor. And again, I think we mentioned this on previous live stream. If you go to the editors, you can make sure that use drum editor when the drum map is assigned. And then when you double click, this will immediately take you into the drum editor. So, see if, again, and let me know if how you're entering the editor, if you're double clicking on a part that's sent, or if you're using a keyboard shortcut to launch the editor. But again, check this preference to editors, and use drum map editor when drum map is assigned. So let me know if you have that checked, or if you're just seeing the key editor. And then as you kind of click on particular notes that you see the drum sound name kind of pop up. And we hope you're okay with the storm that passed through Florida, Rob. I saw that there was like 6 foot. I think my friend, one of my college roommates who lives in St. Petersburg, got lots of rain. So he was pretty worried about his house, but he was safe. It's the important thing. All right, so we have Jersey Boy is Derek from Memphis, Tennessee. Thanks for joining us. All right. Let's see. Ravi says, I want to buy Cubase Artist. Offers ended. Can I buy again? Yeah, so the offer, the 50% off discount was, through Wednesday. That's when it ended, so you can always buy again, but probably not for the discount. So, but if you have, one copy of, so it says I want to buy, yeah, so, but, there's other ways. If you have another DAW, you might be able to do a competitive cross-grade. All right, so you see from Rob, says, however, nothing shows in the drum editor. It works when I open the same project in Cubase 12. Any suggestions? If you want to send me a screenshot, Rob, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We could see if we could have a look at it. All right, so we have Diamond District Studios, who says, Greg, kindly demonstrate how to use the Doppler plugin. I find it very confusing and totally gave up on it. So this is a plugin that's in Nuendo. All right, so you kind of do it within the direct offline processing. Okay, so let's say we have all right, so imagine this is like an ambulance or something. So let's say, and the Doppler effect is like when an ambulance is approaching or like an emergency vehicle is approaching, that the pitch is higher, and as it passes you, the pitch decreases. That's known as the Doppler effect. So we hear kind of a constant pitch with the siren there. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go to the offline processes. We will go to the plugin. And let's open up the Doppler effect. So I think we want to set this to manual. All right, so as we do this, we could say, okay, okay, I'm going to put this on automatic. So let's say this is my start position, like where I see the car. Then as it's transitioning, as it's like near us, we could adjust a listener perspective. And now we say the end of the file. And now when we listen to it, so you could obviously kind of make better decisions. But once you're in automatic mode, you just kind of say, okay, this is where we see it, so that's where we start to hear it. We can have maybe the transition. This is when it's at the listener position, and this is when it's at the end. So now, as again we hear this, you could just come over and make those changes. So again, set your start point. Let's say listener and end, and then you'll hear the pitch. So you can adjust it like that. So it's not like a traditional plugin that you run as an insert, but it's kind of more of a direct offline process for that. And that's kind of a plugin. It's unique to Nuendo, so let me know if that helps you, Diamond District Studios. All right, wonderful to see Peter from Montreal. All right, DJ Alex Man says, hello, I'm having trouble balancing volumes in Cubase. When I lower one channel slightly, another one stands out, causing an imbalance. All right. So, that's kind of the art of mixing, so as we're working on a track, so let's just open this up. So let's say if we're... I'm on the outside looking in. You put the close side up on your heart. All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here? So, if we come over here and adjust the piano, the bass gets louder. You hear that more, the vocal gets louder. So if I drop this out, we hear the cello more when we drop the melody. So, it's always going to be a balance of, and sometimes, see people will get, will kind of go crazy, mixing different scenarios and muting different sources and getting a balance that works. Get the drums to sound perfect, and then when they bring the bass in, then the kick drum doesn't work with the bass. So it's always good to think of, everything has to be in context. You could have, a bunch of tracks that sound amazing by themselves, and when they get all put into the project together, it doesn't work at all. And, because sometimes like a lot of bass sounds that work, like electric bass sounds that work really well in a track don't sound good by themselves. If you listen to it, you go, oh, it sounds terrible. But in the track, it does magical things. So there's lots of instruments like that. So, it's kind of the nature of the beast of mixing that, when you bring something down, you're going to hear something else more. So is that a bad thing? Or is it when you bring the original element up, does the other thing still sound too loud? That's the question. Sometimes you could use that to isolate, potential problems in your mix. And sometimes, when all the elements are there, you realize that it isn't a problem. So it's always, it's hard to, and there's no plugin that will immediately make that better, even though some plugins may market themselves as fixing everything in your mix. But, a lot of it is just going to be experience and just kind of making a lot of mistakes over a period of time and learning from that all the time. So wonderful to see Azalea Music from Nashville. So looking forward to seeing you next month, Fet, at our Club Cubase event on the 23rd. So looking forward to that. All right, Zephaniah just says, how can I add delay in a vocal audio track without adding another track using Cubase 13 Pro? So let's say we have like our vocal track here. And here, thought I would be. All right, so just, two different ways. So one is we could add an effects track. So if I wanted to add an effects channel to this selected channel. Didn't you see? So I'll just come over here and let's add a quarter note delay. The way I looked at you, I fell right through. I'd do it all for you. Now I'm uninvited. So I'll do like maybe a dotted quarter delay. I'm on the outside looking in. You put the close sign up on your heart. So here we've added an effects channel track. Now if you don't want to do that, what you could do is just come over and put it as an insert. So at this point, and when we do like a delay as an insert, So as I add a ping pong delay.
Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
And since our vocal is on a mono track, if I want to have a stereo delay, I could click and make the channel stereo just by clicking on this icon. And now as we play, we could hear all of the inserts processed as stereo. Now another trick that you could do is, let's say I just want to do like a quick kind of like almost like a delay throw, where we want to just come over here and just say, let's say at the end of this phrase,
left you for 1,000 years and a day.
So let's say on the word day, we want to.
Years and a day.
So I'll just kind of take this particular region and I could just kind of extend it out. And if we go to our offline processing, like we saw when we were doing the Doppler in Nuendo, I could open up, plug in like a delay and say, okay, I want a mono delay. I want it to be a quarter note delay. I want the mix to be down. So what that's done now is it's automatically processed the delay just in that section.
1,000 years and a day. You were the
So so if you want to use inserts or do like direct offline processing, you could, throw your delay there without adding tracks, or just simply use an effects channel track. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflows. All right, so we have John Howland just saying hello to everyone. All right, Trend Trader just says wow. All right, I'm going to post the Zoom meetup info again. All right, my chat field jumped on me. Let me. Okay, reading through comments. Everyone's happy to see everyone else. All right, so we have Craig saying hello from British Columbia. Thanks for being online with us today. All right, so Peter is happy to announce that he got Absolute 6. He took the Absolute 6 plunge yesterday. Congratulations. All right, 5E says, I've been using a new keyboard and faders and encoders work on only one VST, the one that came with the keyboard. Is this normal? So sometimes controller keyboards, and I think I don't have either of these, but I think maybe the Native Instruments, is probably designed to work well with like contact-based instruments and Native Instruments and Arturia's controllers. I think have a mode or like a button that allows them to control the Arturia plugins very well. But generally most of the controllers that have like multiple faders and knobs, if you're buying it from a company that makes software instruments, will have almost like a button that works well with their software instruments, and one that works as like a Mackie control, and one that works as a standard MIDI control. So generally, a lot of the controllers can do kind of triple duty in that regard, so where you could map it to do any function that you want, or, you want like, predefined integration and control implementation with particular plugins. So that works great for the company because all the parameters show up kind of where people would expect. So, but most of them won't be tied to that. So. All right. All right, so we have Martin White from the UK. Says just bought Cubase 13 coming from Logic and formerly Reason. Well, welcome to the Steinberg family. And we hope to see you on many live streams helping you get up to speed on Cubase. All right, so we see Nothing Channel says it saves in the template. Thank you so much. I'm glad to check that. All right, Flyv is just asking, what's the difference between musical and linear mode? Okay. All right, so linear mode, the tracks or events that are on the track with linear mode will stay at their time position. Okay, and musical mode will stay at their bar and beat position. So let's take a look. I'll show you kind of in the video here. Let me just do a new project. I'll do a create empty, sorry. All right, and we could often do this with kind of, and this is good for video. Okay, so let's say we have video and we're composing for our video here, and I want to have a sound that comes in. Let's say maybe like a swoosh sound that comes in right when that cloud does. Okay, so we'll come over here. I think if we go to Kaleidoscope, let's see if there's a swoosh. Okay, so let's say I want this sound to come in right as the cloud moves. All right, so we're going to come over here. All right, so let's say we have just that little sound effect that's going to happen there. Now let's say I have something that's like musical based. Okay, so let's say now at this point, I have this track in musical mode. Okay, but let's say I want that track to start right where the clouds go. And then maybe I want that track to start there. But I want this track to actually be a little faster. So if I change the tempo, both of these tracks are in musical mode. If I change the tempo from 120 to 140, now when we go to listen to this, we'll see if this is lined up with the cloud again. So now it isn't lined up to the cloud. So I'm going to go back to 120 beats a minute. And I want this track to be in linear mode so that when I adjust the tempo, a track in linear mode is going to stay at the same position. So if we think of it and we open up a ruler track and we switch this to seconds, we can see that we're going to start at 23 seconds, basically. All right, so we start at 23 seconds. Now I'm going to make this track linear mode, this track musical mode. So I'm going to change my tempo. So now this track will start kind of at the same position with the clouds. And this track is sped up. So when I adjust the tempo, this track will always be starting at that moment in time. That's what linear mode does. It's starting at that time code value and is not affected by tempo changes. A track that's in musical time base will actually adjust and will move when the tempo is adjusted. So this way, so linear is kind of, the position is based on the time when it's happening, whereas musical mode tracks or musical time-based tracks are based on the tempo, so will be affected by tempo changes. So let me know if that makes sense. So we see from Balsa just asks, hi Greg, is it possible to have the hub open automatically when I close a project, quickly open a recent project or template instead of file open and so on? So, I think that if you, so it could depend on if you're running Windows or Mac, so there's different behavior. So if you close all of the active windows on PC from 13, it may have been 12, or I think 13, because at that point we went to kind of the Windows multi-window handling standard. So just like a web browser, if you can alt tab in each of your tabs will show up. If you kind of alt tab to cycle through programs, your web browsers will show up as independent windows, multi windows, and that's how Cubase is set up. So if you close all of the windows and don't quit Cubase, like you close all the projects but don't quit Cubase, the hub is immediately opened. And this isn't a standard on Mac OS, so on Mac it doesn't really do it, but I think that closing something doesn't necessarily mean that you're opening something else. So let's say you're shutting down your computer for the night and you're closing your project. You may not want to have the hub automatically open when you close a project. So I think that one action shouldn't trigger another unrelated action. So, but if you're doing it, with the multi-window handling, this on Windows platform, that you do have the ability of closing all the projects and still have Cubase open. So that's why you see the quit Cubase on the hub on Windows platform. So it could be slightly different on Mac or PC. All right, so we have Rolf Schuld checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, Neil Conway, whose cat Miss Priss is joining us as well. Thanks for joining. All right, so Craig asked, I recently switched from Windows to Mac OS and noticed I could keep the buffer size at 128 samples without issues. Does Mac handle the audio interface differently than Windows? So that, they kind of, the Mac OS has core audio, but, I would say I go back and forth between Mac and Windows like constantly. I would say that if you have if you have an optimized system for Windows, that you could run at as low of latency as you can on Mac. So I don't notice a huge difference, but unless you spent like I'm not sure if you spent a lot of time tweaking your operating system, and it could be that your display driver could cause issues running at lower latencies, your Wi-Fi network. So there are some things that could cause interruptions on Windows OS that aren't present on Mac OS. You can get rid of them oftentimes in Windows, so it's not an issue and will behave like a Mac. But either way, I think both platforms run really well, and it's getting better all the time. Okay. All right, so we have Tiago joining us from Newcastle in the UK. I see Peters is talking about the 70% loyalty rebate. So I'm not sure if we'll see that in the future again anytime soon. But okay, we have Jersey Boy says I'm in his second day with Cubase 13 and is glad he found the channel. So we're glad that you're here, and we hope to help you along your Cubase journey. All right, and we have Millard Brown joining from a dreary, misty Friday from Pennsylvania. So, and he's sending prayers for people in Florida and North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee that have been affected by the storm. So Trend Trader asks, is there a probability setting in the sequencer? So there's different randomizing functions, but not a probability function that's currently in Cubase. All right, reading through comments. All right, Uno Memento says whacking the like button will make me happy. So it's good. So Tim Kaysen, the European siren, is messing with his brains. He kept looking out the window. Tim K. All right, so we had an artist known as Love. Great to see you on. He wants people to hit the like button as well. All right, so Diamond District Studios asks, question, I use UAD Apollo and like the sound design in 5.1, but be able to monitor in stereo and have the ability to deliver both 5.1 and stereo mixes at the same time. How do I set up Nuendo 13 for that? So most of the people I know that do serious work will always treat the two mixes separately. But if we have, because you're going to deliver different files and buses. So I know a lot of people will start and build up the stereo mix. And when they're happy with the stereo mix, then expand to 5.1. But if you want to do it for monitoring purposes, so that's generally how it's kind of done, and kind of, my Grammy Award and Oscar Award winning friends that do that work. So, but if we go to your audio connections, what you can do is come over here and have your control room set up. So let's say if I add a monitor, I could just come over here and like this is how I have my personal studio set up. I have 5.1, so we can come over here and choose, okay, I want my 5.1 monitors. Now we also have the option of treating, so in my studio I have kind of stereo monitors and I have a separate 5.1 monitor set. So what I'm able to do is I could take my main stereo, I take my 5.1, and then I treat my left-right as another monitor of my 5.1, like a smaller stereo, and I take the center channel as mono. So if you wanted to have multiple configurations, so now when we're in the control room, we could come over here to your control room. You could pick your different monitor sources. So at this point, you can say, okay, I want to go to my surround monitor bus. And when I'm doing this, and I have a channel going to a 5.1 output. So I'm going to go to my audio connections. Let's make a surround output. Sorry, I'll just make do our 5.1 output, and let's say now I'm routing this track to my 5.1 out. So now, as soon as we've done this, we can come over to our particular channel and we could do all of our panning. Now, the problem of trying to do both 5.1 and stereo at the same time is your effects especially will be very different, because if you have like a snare reverb that's in the front and back, it's not necessarily going to translate perfectly well. But you can check it. So you could build up your 5.1 mix if you want, and then in the control room you could go to what's called the down mix presets. So let's come over here, and once you have kind of your down mix presets, that you could just choose to say, okay, now I'm in 5.1. How is this going to fold down? And this doesn't take your mix and immediately convert it to stereo. So, but if you wanted to know if someone was listening to 5.1 and they only had 2 speakers or 1 speaker, you could see how it's going to fold down. But I wouldn't deliver a mix based on that. Again, I would do a stereo mix, get that exactly as you want, and then transform that into a surround mix, and that will give you kind of the best results, so that if you have something that was panning in your stereo mix, in your 5.1 mix, and then you go to your stereo, that it's like something was panning in a circular nature in 5.1, which is pretty typical, that it just doesn't disappear when it's being routed to other channels. So that's how I would approach it. Craig says, "Don't solo when mixing," says Bob Clearmountain. So Bob's a really smart guy, just saying really simple, profound things. All right. Balsa asks, "Hi Greg, is it possible to click on a Groove Agent pad when we have a slice sample and drag it to an audio track as an audio event?" So, the slicing will kind of work the same way. So, if you want it to, so let me just pop over, let me just go to this project here. And there's someone in my front door and someone. All right, so we'll come over here. So let's say, I'm not sure if you have to slice it inside of Groove Agent or not. But what you can do, let's say I have, I have a drum loop here. So if we want to drag it into, I'll just cut this agent. All right, so what I would do is just simply come over here to like the hit points. So say I go to my hit points, and then I could just choose create events. So now that I've done this, I add a stereo audio track beneath it. I could just take any of these. So all of the hit points have automatically created events on our main project window. So, you could drag it to a pad in Groove Agent and do the slices. But I don't think that you could then just drag the slices. And I think because it's like, why wouldn't you just do that in Cubase? But let's just see if we could. Yeah, so, we could drag this MIDI note out to, if we wanted to take this particular pattern. So let's say I grab the pattern here. And then if I want to like say I want just that particular sound, we could just cut the event here. So let's say I'll just take my snap off. I could take that, split it, Shift X, select, and if I do a render in place, that we could have just that one particular sound. But I think if you just put it into Cubase, if that's where it's going to ultimately end up, I would just take it there, double click, go find your hit points, and then from the create menu you may just have to expose those settings. Just click on create events and then it's automatically done for you. So let me know if that makes sense. I'm going to share the Zoom meetup link again. We'll be doing that about 55 minutes. Okay, so we see Quellen just asks Greg, hello Greg, render in place with disabling the audio track. So if we wanted to do that, I'm going to select the track and not the event. Okay, so I select the track. Then when we come over here, and I can do this for both MIDI and or audio. Let me just see if it's specified, if the question asks for. Okay, with disabling the audio track. So again, if we select the track, we go to our render in place, and we go to our render settings. At this point, we could choose to mute the source track, or we could disable the source track. So now when I do this, I'm going to render this track. I'll disable the source track. So now we can see that this track is disabled. If we're doing the events, we don't have the option to disable. We could mute or leave them changed, but when we select the tracks themselves, that's when we go to the render settings that we could actually get the additional option on the source elements. So again, if I don't select the event and I select the track, sorry about that, that track is disabled. So once the track is selected, then we could choose to disable or entirely remove the source tracks. And you could also choose to hide the source tracks as well. All right, so we're seeing Mark Rabin. You just see a comment about he was watching someone else's live stream. Says asking to explain both nationalities, English, French, German variations, but he ended. So maybe it's the like French and German augmented sixth chords. So. All right, my chat field jumped. Let me just... All right, so we have a question from, it says, do you think Cubase will get modulators like Bitwig has in future updates? Yeah, so generally we don't necessarily talk about stuff, what's happening for future versions until it's actually released. I could speculate sometimes when an area of the program seems neglected, it could mean that there's, like I think if you kind of do an analysis of how Steinberg will do things, if kind of an area of the program seems neglected, it could be rolled into a much larger themed implementation of a feature set. So, and I think that probably like modulators have been neglected in Cubase for a while. So so it'd be interesting to see what comes next. So. All right, so Terrence Shaw just says, hey, y'all, when is the Zoomer? So we'll start in about 51 minutes from now, so at the top of the hour. And see, Fly-V says, thanks for your info, Greg. I love school. Laughing out loud. All right, so Tim K just says the Arturia MIDI controllers in his experience interact really well with Cubase. The Keylab Mark III takes it to a whole other level, so it's great. I was looking at one of those myself. All right, so we see Mark Rabin has to pull away for a few minutes, but will join us later. Thanks for... All right, wonderful to see Gareth on from Spain. All right, so we have a question. It says, yo, is there a way to disable exclusive ASIO mode on Windows? Sometimes I'd like to just mess around with doing something else, and I can have Cubase and something else play at the same time as far as I know. So what you'll need to do is probably just go to your studio menu, to Studio Setup, and when you select your audio system, there's a little checkbox here that says Release Driver when application is in background. So try checking that, and that way if you want to jump over and listen to a Club Cubase live stream on YouTube, and then when you go back to Cubase, you could use the same audio interface for the two different things. All right, so we have Contemplate Music, says woo, I managed to get to live stream finally. Greetings from Derby in the UK. All right, and we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, wonderful to see you on. And he says Texas is here, and Neil Conway saying, Greg, Texas is here now. The party can start. So, and the virtual ice cream distribution. See, Fly-V says, now I know to keep all tracks on linear if this comes again. So. All right, so we see Neil Conway says, Greg, I have a Mac Pro trash can. I wish to install Mac OS. Which flavor is preferred by Cubase and related instruments and editors? So right now they're still currently going through the latest QA test on Sequoia. The one I'm running is Monterey. So that seems fine, and I think Sequoia, there's lots of people are running it successfully, but Steinberg is still going through their quality assurance cycles and testing on it. So I know, and I think it may work with the version. I keep forgetting all my Mac OS version history. I tend not to change mine so much, but Monterey works great, and all the way up to Sequoia is working fine. And again, Sequoia is just going through the testing stage, but there seems to be lots of people running it already. Okay, reading through. All right, so we have a question from music. I guess it's Cow or Cuckoo. Hi, Greg. In the chords, pads, window, when I change presets, it bugs, and my complete controls doesn't control Cubase anymore until I restart everything. Thanks a lot. All right, so let's say if we're in the chord pads and I'm here, I will go to, let's say I have a kind of a Rhodes patch, and all right, so I'll just revert this, or I'm probably still going through my wrong control room output. All right, so now I'm triggering from my controller. This is where I change presets. It bugs on my complete control. Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just try. So let me know if, one, you have this turned on. So I'm not sure when you say it bugs, my complete control doesn't control Cubase anymore. So, try, see what happens if you, so right now I'm playing my chords, just my controller here. Make sure that we have, now I can trigger the chords. But also make sure that your MIDI inputs isn't set to chord track. So, it could be that your MIDI inputs here is going to be driven by chord pads, and now when you play, you can't play anything but the chord pads. So check your MIDI inputs as well and see if you turn this off, if that makes any difference. So right now it's off. I'm playing single notes. Now I'm triggering chords. So let me know if that makes a difference for you. You see Michael Teams just saying, hopes that Brian Sawyer's okay. So I think he might be a little east of the storm, but it's such a massive storm. He says, and we see Brian says wet. His internet and cell services are in and out. We hope that you're safe. All right, see Michael Pierce says sneak out for a little bit. All right, so we see Ronnie B just asked, recently changed from Studio One to Cubase 3 days ago. Can you make your own sound variations in Cubase like in Studio One? So let me know what you mean by sound variations. If it's like doing like, you know, changing like samples, changing tones. Is it sound variations? Are they like chord progressions? So if you could define what this, it may give me an idea. I've never run Studio One, what the sound variations are. And yeah, I see Jazz Dude is. All right, so Craig asks, any tools in Cubase 13 to detect phase between two mics on a snare, for example? All right, so let's take a look. So we have some meters for that. So let me just find. See if I have this in the recent projects. I usually do. Yeah, here we go. All right, so let's say we have like snare top and bottom mics. All right, so you know, so often, you know, one easy way of doing it is just zooming in, and you could see like, okay, we probably have some phase issues here when our, you know, top and bottom mic. But let's look at also, if I wanted to, we could put this on a master bus in a group. But if we go to the analyzer plugins and you go to supervision, there's a whole series of phase plugins. So we could just kind of check the phase relationship here. Let's add another one where we could see kind of the phase relationship in frequencies. So if I wanted to come over here, so we could have kind of a panorama as well as a multi-panorama. So you could just, or this kind of the one I was thinking of, where you could see like out of phase frequencies. So this could be kind of like a monster phase scope. So let's say if I wanted this to be like my panorama. So if I wanted to come to one of the tracks here and let's say my bottom mic and flip the phase, you could see if there's tracks that had problems could be pointed out with the different phase scopes that you have here in Cubase. All right. All right, so let's go to next question. All right, John Koskian asks, what is the recommended method of moving a Cubase 12 project to Cubase 13 midstream? Okay, so I would open it in, I would take the Cubase 12 project. I don't think you're going to have any problems. I still open up projects from, you know, Cubase 7, Cubase 5 in, you know, during the live streams pretty constantly. But what you could do is just simply take the Cubase 12 project as soon as you're in Cubase 13, save it as a Cubase 13 version. And that way you're not going to, you know, your Cubase 12 project will always be preserved as it was in Cubase 12. I don't think you'll have any problems taking a 13 project back to 12 unless you're using specifically a, you know, particular version feature that was only available in 13. So I don't think you have much to be concerned about. You know, to be safe, I would just take the, you know, as soon as you take it into Cubase 13, save it as a different file name, and that way you always have your Cubase 12 project as well. And if you needed to say, for if there was any incompatibility, which I would doubt, you could always do the import tracks from project for sessions and tracks that you've added in 13 that weren't in 12. So you could do that as well. All right, so we see this Jazz Dude did the research. Thank you. It says the Studio One that it might be. It's kind of the expression maps. So I guess it was the sound variations. What the term was. So let's say if I want to come over to this technology that Steinberg kind of pioneered again. So let's say if we jump over to this like cello part here, and this instrument has lots of different articulations that we could switch between. So if it's a Hallian based instrument, we could create what's called expression maps. So I could just double click here on the event. We see the inspector tab for the editor. We'll see expression maps at the top. So for Hallian based ones, I could just simply go to my key switches here. And when I go to, instead of seeing the velocity, what we could do is just choose articulations and dynamics. So I could say, okay, I want this to start off as staccato. And I'll take it off my loop. And I want this to be pitch and sustain. And so like as we do this, we can just take all the articulations and we could just overdub these. So that as we do our changes, and then as we go to the score editor, these can automatically be applied directly within the score editor as well. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, but you could also create your own expression maps, and most libraries will have their own forms of the expression maps, but you can come over here and choose whether you want it to be key switches, if you want it to be program change, or MIDI CC messages. So you could make your own and just call them up within the project. Thanks, Jazz Dude, for doing the Studio One to Cubase translation. All right, Daniel Sager just asked, hi there, greetings from Switzerland. Is it possible to speed up a single audio part in a project without changing the project tempo? So, sure. All right. So there's a number of ways of doing it. Let me just... Okay, so... Sorry about that. All right. So let's say we're playing along here.
Yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
All right, so let's say I just want to take...
Well, even now I'm so in love.
Like we have these little harmonies. So we'll say these are coming up here.
Just like a long, long time ago.
All right, so if I wanted to, one way of doing it is just we could switch our selection tool to sizing applies time stretch. So I could just take these and say, okay, I want those to be shorter. So as we listen to it now,
just like a long, long time ago,
versus the original, or if I wanted these to be longer.
Just like a long, long
I could drag these out and just,
time ago.
so, and then the rest of the project is playing.
You, just like a long, long time ago.
So that's you know, one easy way of doing it. So just use the selection tool and switch it to sizing applies time stretch. All right, my chat field jumped. All right. Okay, so we see just a question, why Cubase still doesn't have chord detection from songs. It does. So let's say if I want to take a whole song, like I could take this guitar part here if I wanted to, and drag it to a chord track, and it will figure out the chords. But let's do just an entire new project here with the 2-track file. All right, so let's say I just wanted to come over here. We'll have this file. And again, I add a chord track, or I don't even have to add a chord track. So let's say I'll just take this file here, select the track, go to the project, and we'll go to chord track, and we'll just say create chord events. And then our chords are automatically detected. So you can just do it like that already. So. All right, so we see Daniel joining from Croatia. Glad you can make it. All right, we see Graham Wichard from Oxford. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us. All right, Dale Nordier asks, hi Greg, is it possible to export a mixdown with the arranger track enabled, which has a region, say, looping 4 times, then continue to the end? So if you're going to do that, when you export it, it's going to have to flatten the file first. So let's say if I want to come here and let's add an arranger track. All right, so I want to just grab my pencil tool. So I want to take this part, and let's get to the arranger. I'll add that 4 times. And then I want the end. All right, so at this point, before we export it, we would just go to the arranger track and then we would choose to flatten the chain. So that's going to just basically take those 4 repetitions, and now we can export the audio mixdown. So we'll say, okay, let's just do our stereo out, and we'll export our audio. And if we want to export it into the project here as well, so we'll create a new audio track. And then, so we could just kind of do it just like that. So you would need to flatten the chain first, but yeah, you could definitely do that with the arranger track. All right, I'm going to paste, don't know if I pasted it recently, but I'll paste the Zoom link again. We're starting about 27 minutes. All right, Bratman Studio says don't forget to hit the like button. Daniel says, if I ever go to America, will you barbecue with me? I'll bring the steaks. Sure, if you come to Washington, D.C., let me know. I have a grill on my deck. So. All right, so we see Dorama channel. Hello from Berlin, Greg. I would like to ask why we still don't have the option in Cubase Pro 13 to change the middle C in piano roll. Cubase Pro shows C3, which clearly sounds like C4. All right, so the problem is there's no real standard because, the middle C is determined by, its reference to a piano. And a piano has 88 notes generally. I know some Bosendorfers have extended low note ranges, but the MIDI specification has 128 notes. So there's no real standard. So there are different companies that choose C3 as middle C, including Yamaha, and some that choose C4. So again, there are more MIDI notes than there are notes on a piano. So there really is no defined middle C within the MIDI specification. All right, Bratman Studio just says, is there a way to make sure all the MIDI loops will play from the media window? I was scrolling through the loops and audio loops would play, but the MIDI didn't sound. What's the secret? So often if you're doing MIDI loops, make sure that one, you have the instruments, like all of the stock instruments loaded. So let's say if I come over here to the media bay and I want to listen for, and sometimes the instrument has to load up and has to load up the preset. And if it's a big preset, it's not as instantaneous as working with audio that's just playing back the audio file. So let's say if I come over here, these are a bunch of MIDI loops. So now when I click on it, it has to load up the instrument. Then we'll start to play. And it may have to unload instruments, but it's not as instantaneous because it will actually have to load up the instrument itself for the preview. So if we want to come over and just choose, let's say, different categories that we can So it may seem like it's not working as you go through. It's like, oh, I don't hear anything as we impatiently scroll through, but realize that it's loading up the instrument in the background to play the sound that this MIDI loop was intended to play with. All right. All right, so we see from DJ Stats, says, all right, Greg, when changing the project root key, does this also transpose the file in the sampler track? So I don't think that it will, because the root key is going to be actually determining, and we'll just do like a quick test here, is if you have like, you know, parts that have the sample metadata. So let's say if I come, you know, let's go to our loops here. So we'll start with maybe a quick drum loop. Okay, so let's say we have our drum loop here. And let's find something that is more kind of harmonic based. All right, so right now we could, if you right click, there's something called the project root key. All right, and we'll see this little icon. So when I come over here and we see, okay, I want, let's say an electric piano part. And let me just find an audio file here quick. Okay, we're synth bass. All right, so say we have this particular voice. So right now, this is set to C minor. So we see that this is in C. So when I go to my project root key and we play, and I say, okay, let's listen to the bass part from the beginning. So now when I come to the project root key, I change it to D. So if I drag this loop into the sampler control, right, and we say its root node is C3, that as soon as if we dragged a MIDI note, so let's say if we come here and I draw in a C3, because the sampler sometimes doesn't really understand. So if I say we're going to go to C3 here and we draw this note in, so now, so that's taking the original pitch, because this transposition is actually doing it in real time. But if I set this to not necessarily the root key, so let's say if we play these both now together, this will be in D, this should be in C. But if we go to the sampler control, you know, what we can do is say, okay, we want this to have no root key. And as we listen to the sample, and if we use a transpose track, so right now if we come over here and add a transpose track, that the transpose track will automatically transpose both the MIDI notes up. So let's say we come over here, and the audio, as long as it's set to musical mode. They're just a little off time, but a transpose track will, because this is going to be looking for the metadata in the samples or within the MIDI loop, whereas that metadata doesn't exist for the sampler track, or it's independent of the sampler track. But using a transpose track, they can both transpose together. All right, so William Bastidas asked "Cuando ayuda en español?" So if you type your question into like Google Translate in English, I'd be happy to answer it. Or if you have a question, I have Google Translate open. I'd be happy to answer your question. All right, Warrior 303. Hey, Greg, nice to be here again. My question, any easy built-in way to determine what note or key a certain sound is in? Like when I need to tune drums, for example. Anything to help me? All right, so let's say if we are in drums, often what you can do is just come over. So let's say I want to take my kick drum here and go to like Vary Audio. And often you can get a good idea what pitch like the kick or snare is here. So we would say that the kick is around the tonality of F, probably, as we listen to the kick. So you could, use Vary Audio to determine kind of what the actual pitch of your drums are, and then if you want to tune them up or down. And what's kind of great about this is, let's say I just want to take the kick. So we'll just take this example here. And let's say the kick is in the key of F, but my song is in the key of E. And it's, why does the low end sound weird? Is that we can now come over here and solo the kick. And from the info line, we could transpose in real time. So I could go down an octave or up. So we go up or down by 2 octaves. So you can change the pitch here, or if you want to do fine tuning by sense, you could adjust it right there. And you could often do that by ear, but if you wanted to know what the original source kick was, you could just go over and, look at it in Vary Audio. You could probably also come over here, let's say if I take this, I'm going to select one sample and I will go to audio and we'll just do a quick bounce selection of the event. I'm going to select that event and let's see, I think it might be in Wavelab. Let's see what the audio statistics gives us. So that when we look at it, yeah. So here we can see a lot of different statistics. I think that in Wavelab, if you have Wavelab, that you could actually see what the pitch is. So yeah, you can see the estimated pitch here in the audio statistics as well. So something that you could also use. All right, I know we had a couple of questions that were mailed in. Let me get to those before we run out of time. All right, so the first question is how to do different metronome subdivisions in a project. Okay, so let's say we have a project and we have different musical feels going on. So I'm going to activate a signature track. And the signature track is kind of where we would set up our metronome. All right, so when we come over here, we can say, okay, we're in 4/4 for our metronome. But let's say right at measure 3, I wanted it to be in 4/4, but I wanted it to be like cut time. So I could say we want to get rid of these, and I just wanted the pulse to be on beats 1 and 3. So as we listen to it, so we'll have 2 measures of 4/4. All right, now let's say I wanted to, we had a series of like triplets and one musician wasn't figuring out the triplets. So we could say, okay, I want to come over here to 4/4. We go to our click pattern and let's say now I want it to be 6 divisions and I want it to be like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now as we put in our division here, so let's say instead of cut time, that as we listen to it, so we have straight 4/4 time, same tempo, but just a different way. And let's say at this point, if we wanted to be like, okay, I want to do 2 plus 4. So let's say our rhythmic phrase is like dun 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 dun, like triplets, but it's going to be kind of like a different meter. So we could just come here. And let's say if we had a 7/8 measure, starting right here. So let's say we get a 7/8. We could put in, okay, I want this to be 3 plus 4. And we could also put in other notes, other pitches, so that as we wanted to listen to it. So now when we start at measure 7, we could be in 7/8 and if I wanted to just change that to so this way I could take kind of one static tempo or one static metronome feel, and even if we're in 4/4 and let's say you're doing like some Frank Zappa type stuff, that we could come over and say, okay, I'm in 4/4, but I want pulses of 7, and I want it to be 2 plus 5. So even though we're still in 4/4, so we got 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 1 2 3 4 5. Or if you want it to be 2 and 3, so 2 2s and 1 3. So you could base the metronome based on kind of the musical considerations. All right, next question we had, can I copy MIDI CC data from one part to other multiple selected parts at once? For example, having 10 string section tracks on one violin section, I made CC data fade out curve, and I want to copy that curve to other 9 string parts on tracks all at once. And all CC1 data only a certain range, CC data from violin part, and didn't find a way to copy paste manually or with Project Logical Editor, MIDI Logical Editor. Can copy paste with only one track part at a time. All right, so I could have played with this and came up with a solution that I think will work. It's kind of a combination of, so let's say, so I came up with a macro for doing this, so it will activate. So let's say this particular project, I have MIDI CC data here. When I go to these tracks, I don't. So I'm going to start off just by putting the left and right locators around this. So I came up with a macro, and I'll show you the steps in the macro. And then the macros can contain also just the components for, it's going to contain a logical editor and a project logical editor preset. So I called it copy CC data. So the first thing we're going to do is process a logical preset of select MIDI controllers. So I came over here. So let's open up the MIDI logical editor. All right, so what I just did is basically said we're going to select MIDI controllers. I could do this to select controller 10 only if we wanted to. I did it for all controllers. Then what we're going to do is we're going to select all the controllers in this event, and we're going to do it based around the cycle markers. I'm going to copy those controllers. I'm going to navigate down. I'm going to paste at origin. And then we're going to glue those two events, because what it's going to do is it's going to copy the controllers and place it on top. And then we're going to glue those two events together. And then we're going to process a project logical editor preset. So let me open that up. We'll come over. And this one is, we're going to select events on the track. So I'm going to select, first off, in the pre section, we're going to select all of the events on the track. So we're going to have this track selected. And then we're basically going to say, as we do this, that we're going to select positions and outside of the cycle marker. Okay, so if I did this all right, we'll go ahead and so we're going to have this track selected in this, and I'm going to run the macro. And as we do this, now it doesn't do it. I could probably select all these tracks at once and do it, but if you wanted it completely automated, this is kind of a more of a fail-safe way of doing this. So I could select the top track here, run the macro, and now when we double click and we go to these particular events, that all of the CC data is just copied and duplicated in all of the tracks. So again, you could limit it to a particular controller if you wanted it to, or if you wanted all MIDI CCs to be kind of pasted and merged into different tracks. So again, we want to process the logical preset of selecting all of the controllers. So select, or I'm sorry, we're going to, so we're going to select, and this may be set to delete, but I think you could select, and then we're going to copy, navigate down, edit, paste at origin, glue the events, and then we're going to, so that we can navigate down to the next track, go to this project logical editor preset, and this way you could just hold it, hold down and trigger that macro from a key command or MIDI remote device, and you could just trigger that key command for as many tracks as you want very easily. So again, we say select all on tracks and position is outside cycle. So give that a try. All right. So we had a question. I own a Focusrite Scarlett 18920 and a Steinberg UR22 Mark II. What I have noticed with both of these preamps is that when I do direct monitoring, the volume level appears to be good. But when I do use software monitoring, pressing the record button on the audio fader, the level drops down by, I guess, 10 dB or so with both preamps. When I'm in software monitoring, I do turn off the direct monitoring or turn on UR22 monitoring knob to the far right. I know that it's not a combination of the direct monitoring and software monitoring causing the volume level drop. Why does the level drop when it passes through Nuendo? Is there a simple fix apart from putting the fader up or turning the control room level up? So, when you're going direct monitoring is taking the signal directly from the inputs to the outputs. I would make sure, one, that there's no plugins on the particular track. So when you open up the track here, that there is no plugins whatsoever on these tracks. So if you don't see any processing here, it's not being routed to a group with any processing. It could just be a simple thing of you have input channels. So when we look at the mixer, and this is one of those things that could be hidden, but you have input channels that are visible. So make sure that your input channels are visible and that these aren't being attenuated down. If it's doing it for both interfaces, it's going to be something like this. I think it's probably going to be your input channel that is attenuated down so that every time you're recording, it's dropping the level. And this is one of those things that is often hidden. So make sure that your input channel, make it visible and make sure that the input channel here, and if you hit the control or command key, you could return it to 0 dB, but you should be getting the same level through that because again, the direct monitoring is just taking the input directly to the output and it's not going through any software. So somewhere in the software, it's getting attenuated. And I would think my guess is it's going to be in the input channel because it's not the obvious place that you would look if you turned off all processing. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so Dwight Cunningham from the Bahamas says, Greg, can you explain using hardware in Cubase, what is the best audio interface you would recommend? So, for audio interfaces, what I run in my studio, I have an AXR4U. It's a 32-bit integer converter. It has built-in modeling of Rupert Neve Silk mic preamps. It says Steinberg interface. It was recently discontinued for parts supply issues. It has a 384K converter. So it has built-in DSP. So it really depends on, how many inputs and outputs you need. Will you need to expand for future inputs and outputs in like banks of 8? Then you get something with like an ADAT or an AES digital connection with it. I think pretty much most audio interfaces sound really good these days, and if something doesn't sound good, that it's generally not the audio interface or the converter's problems. Even a really modest UR22 sounds really great. Figure out how many inputs and outputs you need, and if you want to actually be expandable in the future. And then you get some ADAT light pipe is a common way of expanding your I/O. War U303 says, embarrassed to learn that there's a signature track like this that's editable. All right. Let's see if we get one more quick question before we turn over to Zoom. All right, I'm going to go ahead and migrate over to Zoom since we're running a little bit late. Let me get that started. And I'm going to start the meeting. And I'll be right back. Hang on. All right, back. All right, seeing people logging in. I'm going to paste the Zoom link one more time. All right, I'm going to mute my audio in Zoom while we get people transitioned over. And if you're still on the live stream, if you learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. All right. All right, so we hear Craig's computer. All right. All right, so some more people joining. All right. All right, I'll end the Zoom and I'll end the live stream here in just a minute. All right, we have Zai, Fernando joining. Here, I'll turn my camera on here. Yeah. Hey. Hey. Yeah. All right, so some more people joining. Terry Shaw and Jeremiah Jacobs. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream. So we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So let me end that. All right.